The courtroom was silent, except for the faint rustle of papers and the quiet footsteps of the bailiff. The air felt thick, like something heavy was waiting to be said. At the center, a woman sat nervously, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes scanned the room, filled with people who had come to listen, judge, or maybe just watch. She was quiet, almost small in the large courtroom. But there was something in her eyes, a steady fire that refused to be dimmed. The judge sat high on his bench, his face set in impatience. He tapped his gavel lightly, as if urging her to hurry. The judge's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall, and then back to the woman, his body language telling her to get to the point and finish quickly. No one else seemed to notice the tension building between them, but the woman felt it deep inside her chest, a tightening knot of fear and determination. The room waited, holding its breath. Would she speak up? Would she be heard? The moments stretched long and thin, like the quiet before a storm. The woman's name was Emily. To many she was just a quiet face in a crowded town, but her family name carried weight, more weight than most people could understand. Her father was a man everyone knew, but no one dared to speak again. He was powerful, a man with friends in high places, including judges, lawyers, and politicians. His influence stretched across the town like a shadow that never lifted. People whispered that he could make problems disappear, or worse, make them worse if crossed. Emily had grown up watching how his power shaped everything around her. At family dinners she heard hushed conversations about who to avoid and what not to say. At school, other kids would glance her way but quickly look away, afraid or unsure. She had seen how people would protect him, even when it meant ignoring the truth. Now she was in court because of something important, a case that could shake the very foundation of her father's influence. Emily had witnessed things that most people turned their backs on. She wanted justice for those who were afraid to speak, for those who had been silenced. But speaking out meant risking everything: her safety, her family, her future. The courtroom was no longer just a place for rules and order. It was the battleground where Emily faced her greatest fear, standing up to her own father's shadow. The judge wanted her to hurry, to finish quickly. But Emily knew her words mattered more than anyone realized. The moment Emily began to speak, the judge's patience started to wear thin. His voice cut through the quiet courtroom sharply. "Please, miss. Let's keep this brief. We don't have all day," he said, tapping his gavel impatiently. His eyes never left her, cold and Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew this was going to be difficult, but she needed to tell the truth. She started to explain what she had seen, the details that could change everything. But before she could finish her first sentence, the judge interrupted again. "Stick to the facts, no long stories," he ordered. His tone wasn't just impatient. It felt dismissive, like her words didn't matter. The courtroom began to stir. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered quietly, surprised by the judge's harshness. A woman sitting near the back shook her head slightly, clearly unsettled by the way Emily was being treated. Emily didn't respond with anger or frustration. Instead, she stayed calm, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. She knew the judge was trying to rush her, to silence her, but she refused to be pushed aside. With quiet strength, she tried again to speak, choosing her words carefully but with clear purpose. The judge frowned, leaning forward. "Miss, you've already had your chance. If you can't be quick, I will have to stop you." Whispers grew louder in the courtroom now. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone wanted to know what she was hiding, why the judge was so eager to cut her off. Was she protecting someone, or was she about to reveal something no one expected? Emily's eyes scanned the room. She saw some faces filled with curiosity, others with doubt, but none of that shook her. She knew that if she didn't speak now, the truth might never come out. Whatever fear tried to hold her back was pushed down by a stronger force inside her: the need to be heard. The judge glanced at the clock again, clearly growing frustrated. But Emily was ready. She had a story to tell, and no matter what, she would not be silenced. Emily's voice was quiet at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger, clearer. The courtroom leaned in, sensing something was about to break the silence. "My father," she said slowly, "is Judge Richard Mallory." A heavy hush fell over the room. The judge himself froze. His gavel paused mid-air. His eyes widened for just a moment, shock flashing across his usually stern face. Suddenly the impatience vanished, replaced by a careful silence that was almost cold. The name hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on everyone. Richard Mallory was not just any man. He was the very judge presiding over this court. The truth that Emily had held back, the secret she had been afraid to say aloud, was now out in the open. The judge, her father, was the reason this case had been so difficult, and the reason she had been rushed and silenced. Emily took a breath, and continued, "My father's influence goes beyond this courtroom. He controls who gets justice, who gets ignored. This case," she paused, looking directly at the judge, "is about people he wanted to protect. People who should have been held accountable but instead were shielded because of him." Some people looked stunned. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few faces in the crowd showed signs of anger, as if they had long suspected something but never dared to speak. Others seemed afraid, worried about the consequences of this revelation. Emily's eyes stayed steady on the judge. "I'm here because I want the truth to be heard, because I want justice for those who have been silenced for too long." Her voice shook slightly, but never broke. The judge finally lowered his gavel, a flicker of unease crossing his face. The power he held was being challenged in a way no one expected, by his own daughter. The courtroom, once filled with impatience and control, now felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. In that silence, Emily's courage spoke louder than any words. She had broken the chain of fear, and no matter what happened next, the truth was out. After Emily spoke her father's name aloud, the judge's entire demeanor shifted. The impatience and dismissiveness melted away, replaced by a careful, almost cautious calm. His eyes, once sharp and cold, now flicked nervously between Emily and the courtroom. The gavel stayed silent in his hand, no longer a tool to cut her off, but a reminder of the power he still held. But now that power felt uncertain. The courtroom buzzed quietly, as whispers turned into murmurs of support. Some people who had been silent before now nodded subtly, as if Emily's bravery gave them permission to believe in truth again. A group of women sitting near the back exchanged looks of respect and hope, their eyes bright with something like courage. For many of them, Emily's stand was more than just a testimony. It was a quiet revolution. Fear still gripped her heart, knowing the risks she had taken by speaking out. What if her father turned against her? What if the people who protected him tried to silence her in other ways? But alongside that fear was something new. Hope. Hope that this moment, this brave act, could spark change. Relief washed over her too, not because the battle was won, but because the truth was finally spoken. The weight she had carried for so long, the fear of staying silent, the shame of hiding began to lift. She had chosen courage over comfort, truth over silence. Standing up to power was never easy. Emily knew that well. She had felt the heavy shadow of her father's influence all her life. But now she was proof that even the strongest shadows could be challenged. Her voice, quiet but unwavering, had broken as the courtroom settled into a new kind of silence. A subtle but powerful shift hung in the air. Something was changing, not just in this case, but in the way justice might be seen from now on. People began to understand that power couldn't protect wrongdoing forever, especially when someone was brave enough to speak out. Emily walked out of the courtroom that day, her steps steady despite everything. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: speaking the truth was worth the risk. And maybe, just maybe, her courage would help make the legal system fairer for everyone. Emily stepped out of the courtroom, into the bright sunlight, the noise of the world rushing back around her. She didn't know what the future held. The road ahead was uncertain, and the fight was far from over. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt before: pride. Pride in herself for finally speaking her truth, no matter the cost. Her story was a reminder that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to stand up, even when the odds seem too great. Facing bias and power isn't easy. It can feel like shouting into a storm. But every voice matters. Every truth told is a step toward justice. Change often comes slowly, almost unnoticed. But moments like this, moments when someone dares to break silence, create ripples. They inspire others to believe that fairness is possible. They remind us that no system, no matter how powerful, is above the truth. Emily's courage was a quiet spark in a world too often shadowed by fear and silence. And sometimes that spark is all it takes to light the way for something better. It lives in the brave hearts willing to speak up, and as long as voices rise, hope remains.